In 1966, in a psychology laboratory at Duke University, a man named Jack Brehm ran an experiment so simple it sounds like nothing at all. He gave people small choices, which of two records to keep. Nothing was at stake. And then, in some versions, a stranger would lean in and say casually, "I think you should choose this one." That was it. Not a command, just a nudge from someone with no power over them at all. And the people ran the other way. Not sometimes, reliably. The moment someone tried to steer them toward an option, even one they'd liked a second earlier, that option lost its appeal. The nudge didn't attract them, it repelled them. Brehm gave the effect a name that has survived 60 years. He called it psychological reactance. The finding, stated plainly, the human mind treats its own freedom of choice as a possession, and the moment it feels threatened, even slightly, even over something trivial, the mind defends it the way a body flinches from a flame before thought arrives. Now hold that, because if the mind guards its freedom that fiercely over a record, imagine what it does when someone has spent years controlling something far larger. Imagine what it does when it finally gets free. That is the real subject here, not how to spot manipulation, but what is actually happening inside a person the moment their influence over you dies. 2 decades before Brehm, Stanley Milgram, a boy from the Bronx, the son of Jewish immigrants who watched the Holocaust from the wrong continent, grew up to ask one question: how do ordinary people do monstrous things simply because they're told to? You know the shape of his 1961 experiment. Volunteers told to deliver what they believed were escalating electric shocks to a screaming stranger, and most of them kept going because a calm man in a lab coat said, "The experiment requires that you continue." But here's the part almost no one tells. Milgram ran it more than 20 ways, and obedience collapsed when the authorities' presence weakened. Orders by telephone instead of in person. Compliance dropped by more than half. Remove the lab coat and people stopped. The lesson: control is not a property of the controller. It is a relationship, and the instant the other person's belief thins, the power begins to die, often all at once, like a current cut. Which raises the harder question: if you're the one holding the power, what does it feel like to feel the current going out? For that, we need Hannah Arendt, the German Jewish philosopher who fled the Nazis, survived a French internment camp, and spent her life studying how power actually works. In her 1970 essay on violence, she drew a blade-sharp distinction. Real power, she argued, is people freely agreeing to move with you. It evaporates the moment they stop. Violence is the opposite. It's what you reach for when power is already gone. Violence appears where power is slipping. Sit with that, because it's the hinge of everything. When a person can no longer command your genuine cooperation, they don't calmly accept it. They escalate. The guilt trips, the sudden victimhood, the manufactured warmth. Arendt would recognize each not as strength, but as its collapse. A person who actually held authority over you wouldn't need to perform. The performance begins precisely when the authority ends. This is why the behavior surges right when you'd expect it to stop. You set a boundary. Instead of retreating, they escalate. It feels backwards. It isn't. You didn't provoke an attack. You triggered a system's alarm. And the ancient world saw this first. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a man born into slavery, his leg broken, by some accounts deliberately, became one of history's great teachers. His name was Epictetus, and his whole philosophy rests on one ruthless line: some things are within our power, and some are not. Our judgments, ours. Other people's choices and approval, never ours. A person who's been controlling you has lived on the wrong side of that line for years. They treated your compliance as their possession. So when you reclaim it, what they feel isn't disagreement, it's loss. Real, grief-shaped loss over something they were never entitled to. As Marcus Aurelius, who read Epictetus while running an empire, kept reminding himself, you are not responsible for another person's reaction to your honesty, only for the honesty. But, and here's where we stop congratulating ourselves, that same line cuts both ways. Everything I've said can be turned into poison. You learn about reactance, and now every piece of advice feels like an insult. You learn about Arendt, and now every person's hurt gets filed as escalation. You learn about Epictetus, and now every relationship that asks anything of you is not my responsibility. You've built a wall, and walls don't distinguish between the people trying to control you and the people trying to love you. The psychologist John Gottman, who spent decades recording couples in a Seattle lab, named the behaviors that predict a relationship's death. One is stonewalling, total withdrawal, the shut door. And to the person doing it, stonewalling feels exactly like a healthy boundary. It's dressed in the language of self-respect. But Gottman's data showed it working as a slow poison, punishment that feels righteous. The boundary and the wall use the same words. I don't owe you an explanation. I'm protecting my peace. Identical sentences. A real boundary protects a relationship you want to keep. A wall avoids the work of closeness and calls it strength. The philosopher Martin Buber, in his 1923 I and Thou, named the danger exactly. You can meet another person as an it, an object, a threat to manage, or as a thou, a full presence. And everything in this essay can quietly turn every person into an it, every request into an encroachment. That is the real failure mode. Not manipulation, the overcorrection. The person so armored against being controlled that no one can reach them anymore, including those who only ever wanted to be close. So the wisdom was never in the boundary. Anyone can build a wall. The wisdom is in the terrible discernment of which is which, telling the person reaching for your leash apart from the person reaching for your hand. No framework can make that judgment for you. It has to be made alive, each time, at cost. The people comfortable with you when you are compliant won't always be comfortable with you when you're free. That's not proof you did wrong. It's simply information, data about what was really between you. Read it honestly. Control loses its power the moment you stop needing someone's approval to feel real. But freedom loses its meaning the moment you use it to make sure no one can ever reach you again. You were never trying to become someone no one could move. You were trying to become someone who gets to choose what moves them. That distinction is the whole of it.